Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So, on the back of that last one, there was a bit I wanted to talk about, and I've been thinking a bit more about Loki's Double Down News video, which I'll put in Companion of the Pursuit of Truth, and I'll add as a link to both these videos. First, I wanted to elaborate on a bit that I thought I needed to, when I talked about soldiers. I think I mentioned a bit about where organizations that money are given to, they acted more like armies did in the instance of not kidnapping and stuff like that. And obviously, I'm against army and war and that kind of stuff. I know in our system is we've justified it, but personally, I don't like the idea of those things. I think that shows the failing of humanity when those things are done, and humans wasting energy and resources on weapons to kill each other, which could be best placed in other things like keeping us alive and working together. But I wanted to acknowledge, because that point made it look like that armies, that obviously there are armies that do things illegitimately, who, what I meant is like within the framework of accepted norms of that combatants, that soldiers go after soldiers, and it's to do with and non-civilians' lives are protected. And I know there are lots of, if we look at Iraq and Afghanistan, or the Vietnam War, or even the Second World War, where civilians, Americans coined that term as collateral damage. And obviously, the rape and all that, or in historically the pillaging and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not trying to say that as long as you do as a soldier, and that's okay. To me, I'd prefer there would be no soldiers and no legitimization of killing human beings. But unfortunately, we live in this world, in this system. I don't like this system, and I think the way the system is causes all these problems of division of each other, and allows these other things to carry on by. But if I have to ask the question to myself within the system, because I was thinking about what Loki was saying, it was a very good video, and there's a lot of good points in there. The only thing, the only thing that I questioned is that where he would talk about what Israel or America are doing, and granted, what's going on in Gaza, it's like I said, I've never seen anything like that before, and I've made countless videos on the Pursuit of Truth illustrating the suffering of human beings that are not ascribed to a terrorist organization, or just children who have yet to make their views or to become involved in any way. But yeah, just the idea of that sort of saying like this was bad, and then not, and then but what Iran was doing by playing a speech of the supreme leader talking about, he will help out people whenever, and then making him look like, hey, yeah, I get, you could pick any world leader and give them where they say a quote that makes them look good and honorable and moral, and maybe they are, but then also maybe they're just saying things. And you see things that this is why I don't, not to do with him, but to do with generally with people, and especially world leaders. And this is what I talked in the last few Pursuits of Truth about the double standards and hypocrisy of most, if not all, world leaders and countries. Is that that you can't say that, look how, say, Israeli and Americans are indiscriminately, deaths of children are happening during their practices of war, and yet not also acknowledge, say, if Russia or Palestine or Gaza or Iran through their proxies are doing the same thing. You have to acknowledge it, and you have to acknowledge, because the thing is, if you don't, then it's sort of like one-sidedness, and then that's not actually true, then, is it? Now, I know that I guess Loki will come from the side of that, and this is what I was thinking about. It's difficult, isn't it? Because how would you, if you were, say, because the thing is, like I said before about us time and place and how we're programmed and how we live. Obviously, in the West, we see as America as the good guys and us as the good guys, and we're programmed to see Iran and Russia as the bad guys, and and so then, when Iran are funding Hezbollah or Hamas, then we see that as terrorism as well. But when we see America, and I don't know how the funding goes there, with Israel, do they actually give them money? Is it funding in the same way as that, or is it just that they will sell military assets to them, like airplanes and etc.? Is it the same equivalence? I don't know, but you could sort of see that as like, but why is that okay, but the other side is not? If Iran were to, let's for example say there's no money, because the money is the problem. Say if Iran gave Hamas missiles, is that the same as America giving Israel missiles? Now, of course, the argument in the head of a Westerner will be, no, well, no, it's not the same, because we know we can trust Israelis, because Americans only sell things to people, they're not allowed to sell things to people who are on sanctioned lists, who are, prescribed terrorists or etc. But then again, who makes those lists? And then again, obviously you could, like, in the UK, there was some sanctioning of, I don't know if it was weaponry, with Israel. I know it's two ministers. So therefore, should we still, and if people like the ICC&J are investigating, and whether some people are talking about words like genocide or ethnic cleansing, then those weapons shouldn't be going, because then aren't you doing exactly the same that you're accusing the other side? And yeah, I get it. So from that side of view, from someone looking at what's going on in Israel and Palestine, especially like with Israel and the 1967 land and not following international law, that you could say there's a legitimate reason why, the way Palestinians live is not fair, and that people would want to help, like Iran. So how would they be able to help, which wouldn't make the West think, oh, you're a terrorist? Or is there no way of doing that? That's what I was trying to think of. And like, yeah, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because the West deems, how we see things. Well, when you're born in the West, obviously, if you were born in Russia or China or North Korea or Iran or Iraq or Syria, you see things differently. And there's that clash of like, well, then how do we get the truth? This is the pursuit of truth. That's what I'm trying to think. Like, it is very complicated. That's why I find it easier to sort of say that, wait a minute, let's look at all of them, and let's not try to get rid of our bias, and let's look at, universal truths. Like, we should condemn any killing of innocent people, anyone that's not military involved. If you're not wearing a uniform, or if you're not claiming to be a soldier or fighting for an organization where you use weapons or where you use bombs, those are the only two types of people that should be getting involved in wars, and civilians, children, women, and etc. should be free. The problem is like, it's very difficult with Gaza, because it is a completely different kettle of fish to most conflicts. I suppose the only nearest one may be like Vietnam or Rwanda, or maybe even South Africa. But South Africa was a huge place, and it didn't, because Gaza is so small, and the concentration of all the bad things that are happening. It's very easy for you to say that, well, especially if you're a Muslim, to think like, well, look at what's happening to you, my brothers and sisters, and we're meant to be the Ummah. And, how do we help each other? How do we stop what's going on? The same as like if you were South African during the time of the apartheid, you'd be thinking, how do I help this? And if you look at the ANC and there were, Margaret Thatcher famously referred to, I don't know if it was Nelson Mandela precisely or ANC, as a terrorist organization or a person, because they were backing the other side. So I get it. It's very murky, this thing. But what I can see personally is, I see, all of these sides committing things that, seem to be against international law, when they're doing, like with what Israel is doing in Gaza, the stopping of water, the bombing of hospitals, schools, UN things. Even if you think there's soldiers in there, Hamas in there, the idea of like destroying whole areas and infrastructures, well, we know that's against international law, and I know there is a murkiness with the wording of that if they believe there's a threat and they've got rid of everyone from there. But the fact is that what are you leaving people with when they've got no hospitals or no schools, or the condition of people living there and famine and not getting food and electricity? There's a wealth of, I mean, that's why we're hearing these words like ethnic cleansing and genocide from world leaders and humanitarian NGOs and that kind of stuff. There is so much that we're seeing there, and that's why I get it when Loki's saying these things. But I just see that, looking at it, I see like, that's bad as well. That's wrong. And I also see that Iran funding these organizations that are kidnapping people or suicide bombs and all that kind of stuff. That's wrong as well. That's not the way to solve the things. The way America going and dropping bombs in sovereign countries. The thing is, we don't respect each other because, and that's why I always come back to this, it's the way our system is. We divided ourselves, and we're never going to do that until we solve that part, until we realize that we're all brothers and sisters of each other, and we need to get rid of division. We need to get rid of borders. We need to get rid of money, and that's the only way we will stop these problems. Otherwise, it's just going to keep happening, as we've seen throughout history. Anyway, that's just what I wanted to add to that last one. I don't know if I cleared it up or not, but it's very difficult to navigate through it and to sort of try and define how do you know the truth, how do you know the right side, and all that kind of stuff. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.